Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the good news of Jesus Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." This week has been a difficult week. It probably has been one of the most difficult weeks ever in the life of Iglesia Luterana, Clairemont Lutheran Church. Out of the blue, we received an email from Pastor John announcing that next Sunday, February 26th, will be his last Sunday with us. As I read the email, I was in shock, and then sadness came over me. And if I'm honest, fear as I felt the weight of the next few months, and a bit of anxiety, not knowing exactly how things are going to go, right? Maybe you had similar or different feelings as you read the email. I invite you to take a minute or two and turn to someone near you and talk about how you received that message. You know, this must have been kind of like what the disciples felt when Jesus told them on their way down the mountain, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." What? Jesus? What on earth do you mean, raised from the dead? Really? Really? Well, there's a lot going on in today's message. We all know that Jesus invites his A-team, Peter, James, and John, to accompany him on a little hike up the mountain. The next thing they know, Jesus started to glow. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became dazzling white. Jesus was glowing from the inside out, just like a lamp that's lit, just like we were invited to do 2 weeks ago. Let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory, not to you, no, but to your Father in heaven. To God be the glory forever and ever. If that were not enough, then the disciples see Moses and Elijah standing there chatting with Jesus. Like what? Was Jesus asking questions or receiving instructions for his journey to Jerusalem? Or was this really a cosmic show for the disciples to help them through the next piece of their journey? Right? Was this a wondrous gift? Something they could hold on to, hold tightly in memory for the struggle that was yet to be revealed? Is this like our journey that's coming, that's yet to be revealed? We need to hang on to our faith. And again, we find poor Peter overwhelmed, trying to figure out just what to do with all that's happening around him. He's on sensory overload. And he says to Jesus, Lord, it's good we're here. If you wish, we'll make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He doesn't know what he's saying. And while he's still speaking, God interrupts him. God doesn't even wait for Peter to complete his thought, but suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud, a voice said, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." And if that were not enough, then Jesus, the healer, the miracle worker, does what only Jesus can do. Jesus touched them. He said, "Get up and do not be afraid." Right? That healing touch of Jesus can make our fears go away too. Jesus tells his disciples of old and his disciples of today, do not be afraid. These are similar words and actions that Jesus used in many healing stories. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to serve him. He stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I do choose, be made clean." And immediately the leprosy was cleansed. He came forward and touched the bier, and the pallbearers stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, rise." We see Jesus healing the blind, the sick, the deaf, the mentally ill, even the dead. Jesus can heal our fears too. Jesus touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." Jesus says the same thing to us. Get up and do not be afraid. We know that this is not the last time that Peter will be afraid, right? Remember, on the night Jesus was betrayed, Peter denied him 3 times. Yes, he was afraid. "I do not know the man," he said. Darn straight Peter was afraid. Then Peter remembered what Jesus said, and he went out and wept. Was Peter weeping because he denied Jesus 3 times? Or maybe because he remembered that morning on the mountain when Jesus gently touched him and told him to get up and it's okay. Don't be afraid. So maybe this mountaintop experience was really to prepare the disciples for the trials that were ahead of them, for the trials that are ahead of us too. Just like the disciples on the mountaintop, God gives us gifts for our journey. The bread, the wine, the healing touch through our community, that is, the very body of Christ. And he calls to us, "Get up and do not be afraid." We must be headed down the mountain to Jerusalem to do the work that's given to us to do, right? To spread the gospel, feed the hungry, love our neighbor. We have a lot to do. We can't be just sitting there afraid. We need to get up. From 2 Corinthians 4, "Therefore, Since it's by God's mercy that we are engaged in this ministry, we do not lose heart. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves, for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, "Light will shine out of the darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of knowledge and the glory of God in the face of Christ. People of Clairemont, do not be afraid. God is with us always. God is with us in this journey, today and always. Thanks be to God.